Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Huntingdonshire series, a district of Cambridgeshire which contains 81 civil parishes. Without further ado, let's dive into one of them. Welcome back to Huntingdonshire once again, people, in beautiful Cambridgeshire, and it is beautiful today. The sun's out and it's fantastic. This is the third village we've done in this run of 4. Now this is a bit of a special one. This is a very, very small place and it's going to be done in sort of 2 parts. I'm going to film the village and Nikki right here is going to film the church, aren't you?
Well, yeah, I didn't know until now though that you're expecting my footage for your video, but there we go.
Well, we may as well. Anyway, the church is down there and that's a very short walk for you, be about a couple of minutes. And to be fair, I'm not going to be walking much more myself because this is the very small Morborne. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Welcome to Morborne, and if you thought Folksworth was a small village last week, this one's a lot smaller. It's less than a kilometre from one end of Morborne village to the other. Morborne lies approximately 5 miles southwest of Peterborough, just north of Folksworth and just south of Haddon, another tiny village which we'll get a look at next week. Morborne does not have its own parish council, it just holds an annual parish meeting. The village is in the centre of the parish and its church stands at the eastern end. The village may be small, but the parish commands a much wider area, some 1,205 acres in total, most of which is arable farmland. It has a couple of interesting landmarks too within those boundaries. For example, there are 2 tumuli which stand on the western side of Ermine Street, about 1¼ miles east of the church, one circular and the other rectangular. South of the church is Manor Farm, where there's a late 17th century house and a fragmentary moat, which probably once surrounded an earlier manor house. And out to the west of the village, there's not just 1, but 2 huge landmarks, and when I say huge, you'll see what I mean when we get there. It may be small, but this was a fun one. Welcome to Morborne, everybody. Morborne sits just to the north of Folksworth. If you follow the road from Folksworth Church, you'll hit the village after about 1½ miles. It's a narrow single-track road with passing places, so if you're driving, do be careful. Once you're here, you'll be on the green. This is the only road that runs through the village. A truly linear affair, the few houses the place has cling to both sides of this central street. At the time of Doomsday, Morborne belonged to Crowland Abbey. The population of Morborne has varied over time. Currently less than 100 people live here. In 1991 it was just 43, down from a peak of 122 people in 1851. The modern population data is recorded with that of Folksworth and Washingley. Local landmarks include the 17th century Manor Farm. According to Wikipedia, Manor Farm opens annually each spring for Lambing Sunday, which is a national event. I suspect I'm going to be in trouble in a moment because I told Nikki the church was down here, and it is because I can see it, it's just there. But I don't think you can get to it through here. I think you have to go around the other way, that way, to get into it. So I guarantee you in a few moments time when I see Nikki again, I am going to be in dead lumber. Halfway down the green, there's a footpath which runs off to the north. If you were to follow this, you would end up in Haddon. What I found interesting about it is that it effectively links the two villages' churches together. The houses here seem to have no uniformity to them. There's no out-and-out style that dominates the village. Mind you, I always see that as a good thing. It's a peaceful place too, a far cry from some busier local villages like Stilton. The few houses and the farms are really all Morborne village has, aside from its church, which we're coming to. That means I had to look a bit harder for things, and it's funny what you find in these small places at times. A good example is this sign which refers to twitchers. According to the RSPB, a twitcher is effectively a bird watcher who will travel great distances in their home country to see birds they haven't yet seen. They can't park here though. Just goes to show it doesn't matter how small a place is, you can still find some interesting landmarks. On the side of this house here we've got a post box, and look, it's a Victorian post box signified by VR on top of it, and it's still in active use as well by the looks of it. Anyway, the church is just here, right next door, and that, I assume, is where Nikki is right now. Now I'm going to take some shots of my own of the church, and then we'll head down towards Morborne's biggest landmark after this. A church in Morborne was mentioned in the Domesday Book. The earliest surviving part of the present structure is suggested as being the east wall of the nave, which is said to date from the 12th century. This church, dedicated to All Saints, has a very attractive red-bricked Tudor tower. 2 bells are hung here, one of which was cast in 1614 at the Stamford Bell Foundry by Tobias Norris. All Saints also has 2 fonts. There's one on the inside, which you might expect, but there's also one on the outside. This can be found just to the side of the porch. It's believed to have come from a now deconsecrated church at nearby Caldecott. It's a little disappointing this church wasn't open. Inside on the south wall is a carved effigy of what is believed to be an abbot of the monastery of Morborne. This figure was found buried under the tower during renovation work in 1900. To the right of the figure is a Saxon coffin, complete with a lid. And here's a few excerpts from Nikki's video. If you haven't seen it, it's linked in the description.
2 modern ones in between, but it's small, and you know, in that of course you don't sort of get an awful lot of variety. What I do see is, I mean, obviously the ground's very wet today. We had a lot of rain yesterday, although the weather's much nicer today. What I do see is a graveyard that's been kept quite well. We've got some, like I said, all these older Edwardian Victorian stones. Not much that we can read, unfortunately. So, like for example, this one here, I can see it says Susan Killingworth Sturgeon 1876, but then next door to it you've got these which are literally unreadable. You can see this one here that's shaped like a scroll. Let's just go take a quick closer look at that before we move on into the church itself. So again, so this one very covered in lichen, and I literally can't read a word that's on there. Quite an interesting marker though. Looks like boulders from one side and then a scroll on the other. So quite interesting. Let's see if we can get into the church. So it looks like scroll style markers were quite the thing in this churchyard. There's a whole row of them here and 1 or 2 on this section as well. Let's get up close with 1 or 2 of these. They look to be a family. Ellen Anderson Cheney, August 4th 1934. So 1834, died March 16th 1919. Jessie Verdon Cheney, October 22nd 1918. Passed away then, October 22nd 1918, age 54. There's no birth date on that one. And here, Eileen Elizabeth, another Cheney, 19 something 7. Unfortunately the markers have degraded somewhat, but let's have a look, because you can see the little door there. It's like it is open, well, certainly the porchway is open, but let's have a look, see if we can't get in. Okay, I don't know why, but I do get the feeling if we do get into this, it could be a Churches Conservation Trust. Unfortunately it is locked. So if you do wish to look inside, the key is actually held at Manor Farm, but the time it'll take for us to go and get that, it's not a Conservation Trust one, but the time it'll take us to get that, I think it'll be quite lengthy. But yeah, so we've got a few notices here. In fact, I might just have a TVI card in my pocket, because I wonder if he's found a notice board. He's in the churchyard now, actually. I could ask him, but you know. There's a Facebook group here, Stilton Group of Churches. So that might come in useful. Let's see if we can't nobble a pin. No, it won't come out. So I'll tell you what, we just took in TVI's card there.
And from the churchyard, you get a great view of Manor Farm. Perfectly legally, of course, because you're on public ground here. So there you go, there's Manor Farm. Now, all that's left for me to do here in Morborne is to take you to the biggest landmark that this place has got. And when I say biggest, I mean in terms of height, because out there, there's something which towers above everything in this village, even the church, which is high enough. Just before we did that, we exited the churchyard, and believe it or not, we found a parish notice board. Morborne is big enough to have one of these, it seems. Tick it off, folks. That's 3 down in Huntingdonshire and 78 to go. On the way out of the village towards Morborne Hill, the highest part of the parish, you pass a few bungalows before you reach this gorgeous thatched house. This is attached to Earl's Farm. Isn't this just amazing? And now we arrive at the Peterborough transmitting station. These are 2 tall structures on adjacent sites. The smaller concrete tower belongs to BT and stands 98.4 metres high. The steel lattice mast belongs to Arqiva and measures 154 metres high. The Arqiva mast is used primarily for FM radio broadcasting, whilst the BT mast forms part of the National Telecommunications Network. In 2004, the Arqiva mast collapsed following a fire, but was replaced in 2006. Now, we've seen some tall buildings in our time on this channel, but I think this is probably going to be one of the tallest we've ever seen. It is absolutely gigantic, this thing. And of course, I can't stand right next to it because I can't go through this gate, but if I could, in comparison to it, I would just look like a mere speck on the ground. It goes up for ages. I'm having to stretch quite a long way up into the sky to get the very top of it. And to be fair, even the older one, even that's not, you know, short. So there you go. That is the Morborne Hill transmitter ×2. Fabulous structures. I love how this one looks a bit space agey, doesn't it? It looks like it's something straight out of the 70s. Sort of the kind of thing that you'd see on some kind of 70s TV show or something like that. I don't know. It just reminds me of it for some strange reason. Anyway, that completes Morborne, a very small place, a very attractive little village with quite a large landmark just to the west of it. And yeah, it's time to move on to the next one here in Huntingdonshire. There's no picture bit for this one because it's so small that it doesn't really need one. So yeah, another one down in Huntingdonshire and quite a lot more still to go. Time to move on. I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot. This has been the Parish of Morborne.